And now we're going to switch gears, excuse me, into one of the other pillars, which actually has to do with the research side, but not in the same way of research, like specifically about energy healing, but the some of the science that has to do with what it is that we actually do, right? And how this, because it's all about energy, right? So we're working with matter, we're working with our bodies, and then we're working with energy, and how does that all interact? And that is what our next speaker is going to be talking about, this fascinating thing called redox molecules. So welcome, Russell. This is Russell Mariani. And he is going to be talking with us about redox signaling, which is literally the interface between energy and matter. So who thinks that sounds pretty freaking cool? So Russell has a lengthy background in the world of like energetic wellness and medicine, but he's really a health restoration specialist. He's the co-founder of the Center for Functional Nutrition in Northampton, Massachusetts, who's been in private practice since 1980. He's the author of 2 wonderful books around healing digestive illness and principle eating, the no diet way to complete health. And he's going to tell you a story about a bit back, started to learn about this fascinating thing called redox molecules and redox signaling. And that is what he is going to educate us about today. So welcome, Russell.
Thank you, Anne. And hello, everybody. Yes, so that was a great presentation that we just heard. And I just wanted to say that I started out my career in 1980 as a shiatsu therapist. I was a founding member of the American Shiatsu Association in 1984. So in the 80s, when it was pretty unusual to be doing energy healing work, I had a license through the state of New Hampshire, a very conservative state. And so all of you who are thinking of doing this work or currently doing this work, you know, we're way past the infancy of the industry and of the organization. And we have lots of evidence to back up what we're doing. And so thank you, Anne, and all the people involved in putting on this seminar and helping to get this out into the world, because the bottom line in every health condition that exists is energy. If energy is flowing freely from cell to cell and organ to organ, then chances are much higher that that body is going to be healthy. But if energy is blocked at any level, then the body is going to struggle. Systems are going to struggle, the organs are going to struggle, and individual cells are going to struggle. So today, for those of you who've, just a show of hands, has anybody out there ever heard of redox signaling? All right, very good. Okay.
Only since you told me about it a few weeks ago.
That's great. So I had never heard about it. As Anne said, I've been in practice since 1980, and that means that everybody and their brother is always trying to sell me the latest and greatest supplement or therapy or anything at all out there that could be helpful in helping the body to heal, from the most minor symptoms and problems to the most major symptoms and problems. So, and really not anything categorically new has come forward in the world of supplements, probably since the early 1990s. I mean, probiotics have been around since the 90s, and digestive enzymes probably since, in the 80s, and superfood supplements and antioxidants. These things have improved their validity, improved their effectiveness over the years, but there really hasn't been anything categorically new. But so here's a little background on redox signaling, and then I'll share some personal experiences with a redox signaling supplement. So it's a relatively new science, the science of redox signaling, the science of redox biology, the science of redox biochemistry. But pretty much, if you look up through PubMed or go to any major medical research facility, you'll discover that they already have a redox biology program, part of their research is now redox biology. A lot of institutes that have been studying, for example, free radicals in the last 5 to 10 years have changed their focus, even changed the name of their research facility from the study of free radicals or the study of antioxidants to the study of redox signaling. In fact, one of the most recent books written on the subject by a completely independent researcher is called One Disease, and then it's subtitled Redox Imbalance. So what are these redox signaling molecules? So back in 1997, redox signaling molecules were discovered for the very first time. And they were discovered through a deep dive into the Krebs cycle, which is the energy production process inside every cell of our body. And they were observing these little molecules that they thought were, for years, they thought were the kind of exhaust fumes of the energy production process inside of a cell. And inside of a cell, you have these little energy factories called mitochondria. And healthy cells can have as many as 500. Some heart cells have up to 5,000 individual mitochondria, which are constantly producing energy, which allows the cell to do all the amazing things that it does. So back in 1997, there were 3 scientists who made the discovery of these redox signaling molecules. In 1998, they won the Nobel Prize for medicine and physiology. And basically what they discovered was that these molecules, they're called signaling molecules. So they are messenger molecules. They are communication molecules. They activate genes. They are responsible for the entry of oxygen and water and micronutrients that are outside the cell, floating in the blood and lymph outside the cell. Whether or not those raw materials get inside the cell and then metabolized inside the cell, utilized inside the cell, is determined by redox signaling molecules, which regulate the opening and closing of the cellular portals on the cell membrane. So it's very, very important piece of the puzzle. And it's fairly new. It's fairly recent to the scientific community. So, for example, let me put it this way. So most of us are familiar with micronutrient deficiencies. You know, if you have a vitamin deficiency, then and your cells require certain vitamins and certain minerals and certain trace minerals and certain antioxidants and, of course, oxygen and water. All these raw materials, each cell needs different amounts of. And we all understand that if there's a deficiency in any of these areas, then the cell is not able to function in an optimal way. And so things start to break down. So now we know that in addition to all those things that we've all learned about over the years in the world of nutrition, we now know that there's a new player that is absolutely foundational and fundamental to the way every cell of the body functions. And so we can develop, and we do develop, redox signaling deficiencies and imbalances. And so this is a very new thing, but it's absolutely a very key thing. So once this discovery was made, laboratories around the world since 1998 have been trying to biosynthesize these redox signaling molecules and put them into supplement form so that we could bio-replenish our bodies bring our cells back up to normal levels of these redox signaling molecules. Now, let me give you a simple analogy, or before the analogy. So every cell of the body has a life cycle. Some epithelial cells, which are lining cells in our lungs, in our intestines, in our sinuses, have a life cycle of 1 to 3 days, which means at the end of 3 days, that cell is going to reproduce itself. And whether or not, if the cell is healthy, it will go on and reproduce healthy offspring. But if the cell is damaged and it reproduces itself in a damaged way, then the damage gets carried on, gets put forward. And so all chronic disease has its origin in a damaged cell that isn't able to repair itself, and then that gets perpetuated. So what they discovered with the redox signaling molecules is that when there are normal amounts of the redox signaling molecule inside the cell, and these are produced, the redox signaling molecules are produced in the mitochondria of every healthy cell. So as long as normal amounts are being produced, the cell can perform all of its many amazing, miraculous functions, including the detection of damage. So if you can imagine hundreds of trillions of cells in your body, and every single one of them is designed to function normally and to stay healthy into your 70s, into your 80s, into your 90s, and possibly beyond that, okay? If everything is in order. So the ability of a cell to detect damage as it's occurring is the responsibility of redox signaling molecules. So if you can picture that, the cell sees the damage and immediately sends a signal to the nucleus of the cell, which you could think of as the brain of the cell. And it says to the nucleus, I just observed this particular kind of damage happening. What do I do about it? And again, through the messenger molecules, through these redox signaling molecules, the nucleus scans through its database of genetic codes and sends back via the redox signaling molecules back to the location of the damage with the genetic code in hand, which is then capable of fixing that damage. And so the cell goes through a mini crisis. Oh, damage is occurring. I will signal for help. The specific genetic code for the repair of that damage is sent back, and that damage is then repaired. The cell is now back to normal and can carry on all of its normal, amazing activities. Now, and this is hard science. This is what we've learned about how cells function. If the nucleus of the cell determines that the damage is too extensive and it's not worth repairing, then it can send a code for that cell to conduct an activity called apoptosis. And apoptosis means cell programmed death. So if the nucleus of the cell makes a determination that it's just not worth saving that particular cell, it's better to just shut it down, then that's what it will do. The point I'm trying to make is all of that activity, the detection of damage, the repair of damage, the shutting down of the cell, and the healthy reproduction of that restored normal cell, all of that activity happens through the vehicle of redox signaling molecules. So it's just an amazing discovery. It's an amazing breakthrough. And again, I'm only aware of one company in the world, one lab in the world who's figured out how to make a supplement where we can, replenish our supplies. So again, every healthy cell has many mitochondria, and those mitochondria are responsible for producing a substance called ATP. And that ATP fuels all the activities inside the cell. It's like the ATP to the cell is like gasoline to a car engine, or the electric battery to the new car engine. Okay, so let me take a sip here. So, Anne, when I was talking to you a couple of weeks ago, and we were kind of going over this, I've kind of given a little background on what these redox signaling molecules are, where they come from. But in terms of the energetics, what did we want to?
Happy to. If you guys could, Tim, if you could spotlight me too, and we'll do a little back and forth. So you guys got the basics, right? So Russell kind of covered, like, this is what's happening in the cell. One of the things that intrigued me about it so much is that when we're doing our energy healing work, apparently we've probably been working with redox molecules, but we didn't know it, right? And,
exactly.
right, the more that I learn about what's actually happening in the body and the different things that are happening, and I've used that to expand, as I started to get more interested a few years ago in like just mitochondrial health in general, and realizing, and that's redox molecules are a part of what I see as a real emerging field of science looking at mitochondria. And right, that mitochondria are so much more than just producing energy, right? And so I've included that sometimes in my healing work. When I'm asking questions, I'm like checking in on the health of the mitochondria, right? And that specificity, I think, has improved my work. And now I have this new thing to check in on, the redox molecules. So that was one thing I wanted to point out. But the other thing that you shared with me, Russell, that I would love to have you speak to a little bit is how redox molecules are actually created, like that they're kind of like where energy becomes matter. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So again, the redox molecules are manufactured in the mitochondria from the saltwater solution inside the cell. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting is molecules are made up of atoms.
Yes.
Okay? And most molecules are very large, like dozens or hundreds of molecules inside. But the redox molecules are the smallest molecules ever discovered. They are only 2 or 3 or 4 atoms inside. Okay? So,
that's just like our brains can't really comprehend, honestly. That
right.
we can't comprehend even how small atoms and molecules are, and we can't comprehend the difference between a molecule that small versus one that's so big. But that it's important. They're the tiniest molecules that have ever been detected.
That actually do something in our physiology. So the way I think of it is, there's energy. And as energy becomes matter, you have quarks, you have nanoparticles, you have that whole world of quantum physics. As energy becomes matter. And so you have tiny little microparticles, nanoparticles, that are trying to become matter. And at some point, they configure themselves into atoms. Right? And atoms, protons and neutrons and electrons. Electrons, energy swirling around thousands of miles per second. But atoms by themselves don't do anything. They have to join up to turn into molecules, which then become part of cells, which then, it's like that's the origin of matter. That's the origin of life. All, I mean, the foundational building block of all life forms, whether it's plant life, animal life, or human life, are individual cells. But cells are composed of millions of molecules. A cell is enormous compared to a molecule. Most molecules are enormous compared to a redox signaling molecule, which is only 2 or 3 or 4 atoms in size. But what science has discovered is that nothing happens inside the cell without the assistance of redox signaling molecules. So that's really the mind-blowing breakthrough. All of us, myself included, until 12 years ago when I first learned about this, thought as long as I'm breathing properly, as long as I'm hydrating properly, as long as I'm balancing my macronutrients, balancing my micronutrients, tending to my gut, taking care of antioxidants, as long as I'm doing all those things, my cells will know how to function. And generally speaking, that's true. It's just that, as Anne just mentioned, this is a whole new world of knowledge and science that for many people is a missing link. So if someone is lucky enough to be with an energy healer, it's entirely possible that energy work can restore to normal levels the redox signaling molecules in their body, in their cells, because that's the only way that healing happens. And you can replenish, you can improve the quality of redox signaling molecules through better diet, through hydration, through all these things. Obviously, because people get better and they're not taking a redox supplement. And we now have available to us the redox supplement. Let me just make one other quick analogy. I checked the time a couple of times. One of the great analogies for this whole phenomenon of redox signaling is our cell phone. It's explained many, many times. So you all know that in order to make a phone call from one part of the world to another part of the world, you need to have full signaling strength. And depending on where you are, that's either 4 bars or 5 bars of signaling strength. Certainly to download a video or watch a video and to optimize all the functionality in our cell phones, we need to have 4 or 5 bars of signal strength. I mean, it's amazing the analogies between cellular activity in our body. Why do we call cell phones, by the way? Okay. And so if your body is perfectly healthy, every cell of your body, or most of the cells of your body, are at 4 or 5 bars of signal strength. They're at signal strength. But if you have any negative symptom, if some organ is failing, if cells are malfunctioning or dysfunctioning, it could be that the redox potential of that cell has dropped or diminished from 5 bars down to 2 or 3 bars or even 1 bar. And we all know, if our cell phones have dropped to 1 or 2 bars, they're useless or very sketchy.
Right, exactly. Like, so structurally, the cell phone still has all its components, but it won't do anything. Right. So
right, exactly.
It's a couple of questions in the chat. So when saying if a redox signaling imbalance is asking, is that when there are too many or too few? Right. So is there any such thing as too many, or as far as we know, or is it really just a too few thing?
Yes, great question. So the word redox is it's a made up word because there are 2 types of redox signaling molecules. One group is called reductants. That's where we get the RED. And the other group is called oxidants. Now, most people have been trained that all oxidants are negative. They have a negative impact.
That's why we have antioxidants, right?
That's why we have antioxidants. But the whole world of antioxidant science has turned around through the study of redox. So, again, at the cellular level, at the molecular level. Most people have heard of free radical molecules.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Free radical molecules were thought to almost always be oxidants, which interfered with the normal activity of a molecule. In fact, the free radical molecules would cause an imbalance at the electron level. Okay? And so what redox signaling molecules do is the reductants donate electrons, neutralizing the free radical activity. And now the cell can normalize. Or the redox signaling molecules can donate an electron, and those are called oxidants. So, when you donate an electron, that's called a reductant. When you take away an electron, that's called an oxidant. And this is happening constantly, 24 hours a day, every second of the day. The redox signaling molecules in our cells are observing activity and neutralizing the free radical activity that's trying to destabilize and damage our cells through too much alcohol, smoking cigarettes, environmental pollution, all the sources that disrupt our physiology. That disruption is happening at the level of electron transfer, and that's what's causing the damage. So if you have a normal level of redox signaling molecules, then you can neutralize that free radical activity.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. So I'm just looking at some of the chats. I think some of the chat other questions. We can also just, if anybody, so we have a little bit of time here. We left a little time for some discussion here, and then we'll also have a break coming up. So people, is there a link to learn more about the science of redox molecules? I know you have the ebook.
So you can, if people will Google my name, you can go to my website and send me a text or send me an email, and I'll be happy to send you information about all of this. Links to the studies, a link to the science. This is a short introductory presentation.
Right. So Russell does have a gift. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I will be doing a breakout from 2 to 3, and I can answer more questions then. But I'm very happy to send you individually information about this. Yes.
So Russell does have a gift, but it's not specifically about just the redox molecules, but it's in John's principle eating, the no diet way to complete health. So that's in the chat there and on the dashboard. So I wanted to make sure we drop that in the chat because I don't know if we did before. But yeah, let's take a little time for questions. This is pretty cool stuff, right? It's like, this is where in the cell of everybody, every cell, every plant, every human, every animal, in those mitochondria, redox molecules are being produced all the time, right? The tiniest, most fundamental matter, basically. And it's such an important key part of health. And to me, it's just so much about, because this is where energy is becoming matter. So go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question. Aparna.
Yeah, hi. This was fascinating. I mean, I love learning sciencey stuff. So my question was, in the research that has been done, have you figured out what are the most common reasons for redox molecules being either imbalanced or too few? What are the environmental or lifestyle factors or anything that is contributing to this imbalance?
Oh, really? Wow.
Great question. Who asked that question?
Aparna.
Yeah. Thank you, Aparna.
Cool. Excuse me, Maple.
So the first thing to say is that as we age, even if we were perfectly healthy,
we'll try.
It's okay.
If we're perfectly healthy, we lose about 10% of the redox signaling production capability starting around age 20 or 25 for every 10 years that we're alive. So by the time we're in our 80s or 90s, the redox potential of our body, the ability of our body to produce normal amounts of the redox molecules is probably at 10%. And literally, when the mitochondria stop producing redox signaling molecules, we die.
Right, because there's no communication at that point at the cellular level, right? The cells can't function anymore.
There's no energy being produced, and there's communication happening, exactly. And the other cause of the redox imbalance and the redox deficiency are all the other normal things that we've learned: air pollution, water pollution, toxins in our food and processed food and junk food, all those things that cause
no big surprises, right? Yeah.
No big surprise, right?
Thank you so much.
And quickly, because you mentioned this, chronic fatigue syndrome used to be thought that it was caused by a virus. But through the work of functional medicine research, in the last 10 years, we now call chronic fatigue mitochondrial disease. And so we now know that chronic fatigue is a consequence of the mitochondria not producing enough ATP. Well, the reason it's not producing enough ATP is due to an imbalance and deficiency of the redox signaling molecule.
All right, so there's lots of hands up, so I'm just going to say, let's take a couple things. Here's what we're going to do. What's scheduled, it's 12:30 Eastern, and we're scheduled now to have a 15-minute break, right? So people can kind of replenish a bit, and then Dr. Karen Khan is going to come on. So what I'm going to say is, let's take a few minutes here. If you need to go on a break, go break, right? But I think I see a bunch of questions up. So if you're willing to stay here for a little bit, Russell, let's see if we can get some of those questions answered. And if anyone here, if you need to go take your little break now, go take it now. And then we will start with Karen Khan at 12:45. Okay. So Claire. Well, you are still muted, Claire.
Okay. So part of my question was going to be about chronic fatigue syndrome, because that is something that I struggled with. So I'm glad you mentioned that. The other question that I had was, you talked about how there used to be like antioxidants to get rid of free radicals. And now we know that with the redox, we need a balance. Does that mean that taking too many antioxidant supplements or too powerful antioxidant supplements can actually make the redox imbalance worse?
Yes. The short answer is yes. That's entirely possible. And I see that all the time in my practice, even long before I discovered the redox supplements. This is why we have to be careful with supplements. They're to complement and supplement our main diet, but it's relatively easy to take too much or take too little of any supplement. Yes.
So I used to take a lot of astaxanthin because it was supposed to stop burning because it was a very high antioxidant, and now I'm thinking maybe that's not such a good idea. Yeah.
And somebody asked a great question about we now rename chronic fatigue syndrome as mitochondrial disease. And somebody asked, what about fibromyalgia? And so the other question would be, what about fill in the blank? So you
right.
name any chronic degenerative condition. And what I can tell you, based on 12 years of daily research into redox signaling, is I can certainly say conclusively that at least part of the root cause of every chronic negative health condition is caused in part, or depending, can be a small part and it can be a large part of the puzzle, redox imbalance and deficiency.
Well, I mean, now that we understand the role that it plays in how our bodies function, how could it not be? Like you couldn't, it doesn't seem like it seems like it couldn't be possible to have a serious health problem where there would be at least some. It may not be the main thing, right? But it's got to be part of the problem. So, so some people are asking in the chat about the name of the supplements. the company that does that. If you want, do you want to put that in there or just have them reach out to you about that? So Chris Russell is very knowledgeable about that, but there is only one company that's actually figured out how to do this, right?
Right. I think I'd rather have people just contact me directly, as sometimes there's a lot of misinformation on the internet, and sometimes when you just get the name company, you can find
I totally
a lot of
appreciate
nonsense out
yes.
there.
So Russell's email is in the chat. You can go to his website if you and you Google him, and so he can. I'll put this up there again and kind of answer your specific questions about that. All right. I'll just put that in the chat again. All right, let's share. So we have time for at least a couple more questions.
Thank you for your work, and thank you for giving me a minute. I had a question about fibromyalgia. You already answered that, and the supplement question has been answered. I wondered if a general guidance suggestion might be to discontinue general supplements. Is there a test to see if you are needing I'm sure I need it, the mitochondrial support, anything along that line? The fog is coming in again, sorry.
Yeah, so one of the many improvements that we see when we restore to normal levels the redox potential of the cell is brain fog and cognitive functions, and you name it, that whole spectrum of cognitive functions. Because again, whatever the problem is that we can identify, it's essentially a problem of cellular functioning or cellular dysfunctioning. And so, of course, redox signaling being essential to the ability of any cell to do what it's designed to do, this is, for many people, the missing link. So in my work over the years, we've identified, we run the Center for Functional Nutrition. So I've been part of that world for, 40 years, functional medicine, functional nutrition. And there are 7 distinct and interconnected root cause areas. And most of them you're all familiar with: mindfulness, paying attention to habits, hydration, micronutrient imbalance, macronutrient imbalance, oxidative stress, gut health, right? But now we add to that list redox signaling. And what I've discovered over the last 12 years is you could be doing everything correct in those first 6 root cause areas and spending money, investing time, being very disciplined in your own self-care. But if the deepest imbalance and deficiency in your body is in the area of redox signaling, then unless and until you can get that back to normal levels, you'll see very little progress or none at all, which of course is extremely frustrating. But for many, many people, myself included, once I started adding the redox signaling supplement to my daily routine, things really improved. And I mean, I'm 68 years old now, and I may look 68, but I say to people all the time, I was introduced to the redox signaling supplement at age 56. I feel younger at 68 than I did at 56. Okay. And I'll also say, if we have another minute, at the time I was introduced to the redox signaling supplement, my father, who at that time was 88 years old, was complaining for the first time in his life of kind of running out of energy and not feeling well. And we all thought, my siblings and myself thought, well, he had a great run, 88 years old. He's never really had any major problems. And I introduced him to the redox signaling supplement, and he's sitting downstairs. I'm at his house visiting him and my mom, and they both take the redox signaling supplement. My dad will turn 100 years old in September, and he's in very good health, and he has no major diseases at all.
Wow. I love it.
We can have healthy lungs.
All right, so here's what I think we're going to do. I know there's more questions and we can't post anything. So Russell is going to be here during the meal break from 2 to 3. So he will have a breakout room. So for those of you who still have questions, come and join him in the breakout room during the meal break. There'll be a whole hour there to go in more depth. But so Russell, thank you so much for being here and sharing this really fascinating aspect of what we do. And yeah, everyone, let's just give Russell some love and appreciation. And I really love your contribution here. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. So here's what we're going to do, because I do want everyone, if some people are like, I don't want to take the break because I want to hear that. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. Okay. So go take care of yourself, go hydrate, step outside for a moment, come back promptly at 12:45. And you are going to get amazed by the amazing Dr. Karen Khan. All right. So 5-minute bio break. See you back then.